Silver Falls Gaiden Deathly Delusion Destroyers was the last entry in the Silver Falls series on 3DS prior to the closure of the eShop. Envisioned as a sort of swan song for the system, this game was designed specifically to maximize the uniqueness of the 3DS systems, and as such, it really wouldn't work well on any other system. That reason alone makes it a perfect system finale in my opinion, as well as being enough to justify giving the game a purchase. Of course, that's not possible now, but the game files are floating around online, if you know what I mean. It's also technically a 2-in-1 deal. Not only do you get Silver Falls Gaiden Deathly Delusion Destroyers, but packaged in is also Silver Falls Ruby River. I'm not really going to say how these connect to one another since it does spoil one of the cool narrative reveals, but there is a narrative connection between them. They also connect to each other in terms of game mechanics. Deathly Delusion Destroyers tells the story of Gus Ironcock, a longtime Silver Falls resident who is looking for someone very important to him who went camping in the woods but hasn't been seen or heard from since. This takes place around 2 weeks after the events of Silver Falls 3 Down Stars, so Gus is naturally worried about all the mutated and highly aggressive animals that people have reported seeing in the woods around Silver Falls. Gus is aided in his search by his friend, Dodger Roger, but he's not comfortable asking the other townsfolk for help. Over the course of the game, though, more and more people show up to the campsite to help search, and Gus has to confront some of the misconceptions about the people in town that he had. The storytelling and character development is really superb here, and it is definitely the highlight of the game. This is also why Gus is my favorite character in the entire Silver Falls universe. My only gripe with the story is that it doesn't conclude definitively. The game intentionally leaves whether or not this rescue attempt is successful up to player interpretation. There's a lot of artistic merit to that, but for me personally, I don't like open-ended conclusions. I want to know how the story ends. I don't want to have to conclude that for myself. As good as the characters and story are, though, the gameplay for Deathly Delusion Destroyers is really what makes the game stand out. With this game, you hold the 3DS sideways like a book. If you've ever played Brain Age, think like how those games play. The gameplay consists of battles in between story events. Your characters, and there are 36 playable characters, although you can only have a team of 4 at one time, are all on the right side/bottom screen, and the enemies make their way steadily towards you from the left or top screen. Each character has a specific type of weapon that they use, and each weapon has its own range. Some weapons, like the rifle and shotgun, can shoot in a very narrow but long line and hit enemies from a great distance. Some weapons, like the bow, have a smaller, more moderate range, but they can hit enemies in a wide angle. And then some weapons, like heavy melee, have virtually no range, but they hit hard and they can stagger back enemies. Combining the right characters in the right place is the key to victory, so that you can hit multiple enemies at once and have big enemies within the attack cones of multiple characters. You can choose how difficult a battle you want to do, from the super easy you'll never lose casual difficulty missions, all the way up to the giga-hard I will literally never beat one of these Titan and multi-boss missions. Regardless of difficulty, though, you get a new story scene afterwards, and until you've seen them all, there's one after each and every mission. After you have seen all the story scenes, you can just play missions infinitely for fun, as long as you want. So that's Gaiden Deathly Delusion Destroyers. Ruby River, on the other hand, is a very different sort of game. Whereas Deathly Delusion Destroyers is heavily story-focused, there's almost no story whatsoever in Ruby River. You're alone on the banks of the Ruby River, with just a few items in your inventory. The only real story here is what you get from text boxes that appear from repeatedly interacting with those items in your inventory. Other than that, it's pretty much a build-your-base survival game. It uses the real-time clock, so the game changes depending on the time. During the day, there aren't that many enemies, and they're not nearly as strong, and it's mostly just mutated animals. This is when you're going to want to gather resources and build your shelter. At night, however, enemies are much more frequent, and they are significantly stronger. They're also not animals. They're the grotesque creatures like you see in Ghoul Busters and Guardians and Metal Exterminators. You really don't want to do much playing at night until you're sure you're ready, your base can survive a beating, and you've got the weapons to defend yourself. The cool part about this 2-in-1 package is that you can send resources you gather in Ruby River into Deathly Delusion destroyers, where you can use them to help improve your weapons and armor in that game. Then you can send those finished weapons and armor from Deathly Delusion destroyers into Ruby River, which helps you survive the horrors at night in that game. I am typically not a big fan of builder survival games. However, I love the integration between the two, and I definitely spent a decent bit of time playing Ruby River simply to farm the resources I needed in Deathly Delusion destroyers. Silver Falls Gaiden Deathly Delusion Destroyers is a pretty unique game, and it provides something that gaming often lacks. Well-written LGBT characters that don't just pander to people for the sake of having a gay character or a bi character or a transgender character. I love Gus, but Gus is not the only great character here. Slim gets a ton of screen time and great character development that I loved seeing. And there are a handful of other Silver Falls denizens that get some real significant character development in this game. The gameplay in Deathly Delusion Destroyers and the connectivity with Ruby River are great. But honestly, and I know I've said this a few times already, it's the character development that really made this game amazing for me. Add to that the fact that it's an amazing swan song for the 3DS, and I really cannot recommend this game highly enough. You may not be able to purchase it these days, but the files are out there if you have either a custom firmware 3DS, or if you have a 3DS emulator on your computer. However you play it, don't skip Deathly Delusion Destroyers. My rating for Silver Falls, Deathly Delusion Destroyers, and Ruby River on the 3DS is an A.